Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hello out there, and welcome to today's Zoom event produced by the Intel Alumni Network. Let me first start off by saying happy fall and happy Halloween. My name is James Cape, and I'm the current president of the Intel Alumni Network. Today's event is very timely and relevant, as no one can avoid all of the chatter that we have around all things AI. Henceforth, today's topic: how to use AI chatbots as your force multiplier. So let's get started. Both of today's speakers are highly accomplished marketers. Both are Intel alums who, since leaving Intel, started a marketing agency known as the Fusion Syndicate. I'd like to also highlight for those Intel people who may be on this call that the Fusion Syndicate is a qualified vendor to Intel. And then with no further ado, let me welcome Dan Fineberg, Michael Zeuthen, and Greg Hoyos. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, James. Appreciate you inviting us. We formed the Fusion Syndicate shortly after ChatGPT came out, and as communications and marketing professionals, we recognized that generative AI was either going to empower us or run us over. And so we made it our business to try to get as smart as we could about this emerging technology. And what we're going to talk about today is how generative AI and large language models, these things like ChatGPT and Claude 2 and Google Bard and Bing Chat, are much more than just search on steroids. And it's not just about communications and marketing, although that's our area of expertise. This is really about anything that has to do with content development or content analysis. So if you're in engineering or HR or finance or any other business function that deals with content in any way, think of what we're going to talk about in terms of marketing as a metaphor. So, James, I think that you had approached us and asked us to help you with something. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, let's talk about this a little bit. So, Howard and I were getting ready for an Intel alumni board meeting, and we were talking. We'd gone through a couple of major events this year, including the Chip War event that we did at the end of August. Which, by the way, folks, just on the Intel side of things, over 1,700 people attended with the highest rating I think that Intel has had ever. We were just on a call with one of the heads of HR. But anyway, Howard and I are trying to come up with a great killer, thought leadership topic. And it struck us, particularly because this was, after the unfortunate passing of Gordon Moore, that we needed to find a way of memorializing Gordon's accomplishments in the context of the technology that he helped pioneer. And so we came up with the idea that maybe we should have a discussion about the past, the present, and the future of information technology and Intel's role in it. And so, I started the process, because I'm not an engineer by training. I've got degrees in econ and poli-sci. And so I tend to look at things through a little bit different lens, a little bit more of a historical lens. And so I put together what was kind of an academic piece about information technology. And Howard contributed a lot, but it was still kind of dry and a little bit boring. And Dan, who has since joined the Intel Alumni Board of Directors and runs the Fusion Syndicate, I said, "Hey, Dan, you've been playing around with Gen AI. Can you make this thing sizzle? Because Jesus, this is like reading this is like watching paint dry." So Dan, that's what I asked you. That was the problem that I presented to you, and you said, "Yeah, let me go off of the team and let me figure out what we can do with this thing to make this thing sing a little bit better than it does." And the rest of the front end of this presentation basically is going to be the tale of that journey. So Dan, take it away. Tell us what happened.
Right. So what you're looking at is the raw content that you and Howard created, and it took you a couple of days probably to do that. It was a well thought out piece, but it was raw content. It wasn't the promotional deliverable with a call to action and pictures and all that sort of thing. So having that raw content gave me the confidence to know that, oh, I can take that and use that with, in this case, Claude 2, which you're seeing on the screen now. This is the welcome screen to Michael, who's actually running the things behind the scenes here. So we had a prompt that we wrote that's called all-purpose writer prompt. And it has built into it a series of questions that it asks the user to be able to really target the end written deliverable to be much more compelling to the audience than something that you would just normally write as an essay. And it has a lot of other things built into it to guide a conversation with a knowledgeable user to collaborate and build the final piece together. And so we loaded that prompt, which is about 500 words, into the input field. And this is what we got as a response, Claude 2 saying thank you for the detailed instructions and then asking that first question, which is who's the intended audience? And the intended audience is all of you. And this is how we characterized you, as you can see. And then part of the prompt is to play back the understanding of each answer to make sure that there's alignment. Because one of the problems we've discovered as we've worked with these large language models, these chatbots, is sometimes they kind of go off in their own direction. And so there's little tricks we've learned to sort of keep things aligned, and that's one of them. So it summarizes its understanding, which is right from the previous answer. Ask the next question, what's the topic? We tell it the topic. It summarizes its understanding correctly again of that one. Asks the next question about the purpose of the piece. And here we gave it a more complicated answer. We said, we're going to give you some raw content, and we want to take a step back from that raw content, use it all, but look at it from the frame of modular flexibility and how information has evolved, and there have been a series of revolutions in that process. And let's look at everything from the spoken word to artificial intelligence and Intel's role specifically as a volume producer of standard technology building blocks and how that changed our lives. So we gave it a bigger scope than the original piece. So it summarized its understanding correctly, asked the next question about what style to use. You know, should it be telling a story or should it be describing something? Or there's several different styles. We chose narrative, but we didn't want it to be like a once upon a time bedtime story. So we told it the audience is professional and educated. So it understood that and it asked, okay, what kind of format? Should this be like a movie script or a blog post? No, a journal article format. And what length? About 1,500 to 2,000 words, which is about 3 times longer than what the original raw content was. So it understood that, and then it said, do you have any additional context? So this is our opportunity to load in that raw content. And because we're using Claude 2, it has the ability to take in Word documents and PDF documents, up to 5 of them with up to 10 megabytes each. So that's a lot of capacity. So we took advantage of that capability to load in this Word document. And it understood everything we told it up until that point and asked the next question, is there a particular voice or style of writing? We thought, well, since this is an Intel audience and a lot of Intel alums who worked with Andy Grove, let's use Andy Grove's voice from 2 of his most famous books. So that's what we told it, and it understood. And then it asked, do we have a specific call to action? You know, in marketing, you always want to end something with a call to action where people can either learn more or where they can buy something. Again, that's not typically in an academic essay like what we had from James and Howard. So we gave it the call to action. Now, I'm going to skip through a few steps here because it went through an outlining process where we could do adds, moves, and changes to the outline to really control the flow and all that. So after going through that and approving the outline, we then told it to go ahead and generate the draft. And this is what it generated. And this is exactly how it looked. So in other words, to recap, we started with a good quality piece of raw content. We took a prompt that we had written called the all-purpose writer that puts guardrails and structure around the collaboration with the AI chatbot, Claude 2 in this case. And then we got in minutes a draft that was not the finished product. It was about 80% there. It had to be reviewed and approved by James and Howard. And there's no pictures yet in here. And so we had to, you know, do a little bit more work. But you know, anyone with our all-purpose writer prompt and a good piece of raw content could have done exactly what we did and gotten to this 80% point in about 5 minutes. So what's the next point? This is what we ended up with as our 95% deliverable. It still needs to be, put online, distributed, and so forth. But one of the things that occurred to us is we could ask Claude 2 to give us captions for each section in the draft, because Claude 2 is text only. It can't give us the pictures. But with the captions, because it knows what it wrote, it's going to give us good captions. We can put those into something like Google Images, and that's what we did. And we got these. And it also made it easy to credit those images because Google Images gives you the sources. And so that was a human oversight function. And the point here is that you don't just delegate work to an AI tool and get a finished product. You need human insight and human oversight. Human involvement is critical before, during, and after the process. First figuring out what you want to do, and then collaborating with the chatbot in doing it, and then refining it and validating it afterwards. So, James, we delivered this to you, I think, a couple hours after you sent that request.
Yeah.
Uh, what what kind of conclusions did you draw from that?
Well, first off, it was wow. I was blown away. I mean, you sent it to Howard as well, and Howard was able. And again, this is what what you really need to understand and about AI is it's not going to you still got to be involved. You got to review it because Howard found I think about 4 or 5 factual mistakes that were made that we needed to correct. So human involvement is critical. Now over time, those kind of hallucinations over time will decline. But this tool really kind of highlights for me a problem that all of us marketers have had to struggle with is we're in a fiercely competitive environment. We're always being beat up because we're a cost center and we get burned out about being told to do more with less. So the goal is utilizing these tools, is figuring out how to empower your marketing teams, and if you're running your own consulting marketing shop, how you're going to utilize these tools in the most effective way to tackle some of the biggest problems within marketing. And then finally, you just got to recognize that the solution here truly is a combination of both you and the tools, right? And Dan, I think, as he went in the next set of slides, is going to talk about an analogy that I love that he came up with. Is just okay, James, because I was not. I have gone through this with Dan and the team probably 3 times now, Dan. I think, and
Yeah.
every time I go through it, I'm learning something more. And Dan came up with this great analogy that you got to think about your AI tools is that you've got this idiot savant intern who is really incredibly brilliant, but you have to be incredibly accurate and precise and thoughtful. And oh, by the way, conversational to get this idiot savant tool to do what you want it to do. Now, maybe in the future, we won't have to do that. But at least this generation of tools, AI tools, you're going to have to. And with that, Dan, go ahead and take it from here.
Yeah. The idiot savant idea might be a little harsh, but it does have a big kernel of truth. And I think the big idea here is that it's collaborative intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence. We're working together. It's a fusion of our ingenuity and the amazing productivity and capacity of AI. And so what we're going to do is use marketing as a proof point. And if you're not in marketing and you're dealing with content in other ways, as I said earlier, you can do the same things here. So we're going to give you some content creation tips that go along with the branding and messaging aspects of marketing, because that's such a natural connection. And then we're also going to spend a little bit of time on preparing your team, you as a leader, how you can prepare your team and the culture of your organization, and also bring in the ethical governance that is so necessary because, with great power comes great responsibility. There's a lot of myths about AI. I think the biggest one is it's going to take away our jobs. And I think, like with any major technology discontinuity we've seen with PCs and with the World Wide Web and so on, uh, you either embrace it or it does run over you. And so the point is we need to embrace it responsibly, and it will give us superpowers. The next myth is that it's going to take away our privacy. And the good news is the major platforms, the ChatGPT, the Claude 2, Google Bard, all these major platforms are anonymizing and aggregating data because there's a lot of regulation already in place in the EU and emerging in the United States and even China that's going to cost these companies many billions of dollars if they don't. And the third myth is that AI is going to make all these decisions and we're all going to become slaves. And at least at this point, the human is always in the loop. And again, there's a lot of regulation and a lot of AI safety work going on, hopefully to keep it that way. But it's definitely that way today. Now let's talk about branding and messaging as the key example here. And when we talk about branding, we're not just talking about a logo. We're talking about the thing that differentiates your organization from all competitors, the unique promise that you can make based on the needs of your target market and the unique capabilities and resources of your organization. And there are AI tools that can help you figure that out by going through lots of data on the web, looking at lots of interactions with social media that you and your competitors have put out there to find that opportunity that differentiates you. And then activating that. Once you articulate that promise with the help of AI, and the human users, of course, choosing among the options, then figuring out ways to implement that across advertising and PR and events and all the other media mix. And AI can help you build lots of different ways to do that. In addition, PR and social media, earned media, AI tools can generate the actual copy for you, the story pitches, all in alignment with that brand promise and those earlier deliverables from this whole branding and messaging process. Now, one of the things that happens at this stage is lots of content development, and that content development is different for different touch points that customers have as they get to know you and start to want to buy your products. You might have early awareness things that are very short and brief, and then longer things at the consideration phase that are like data sheets. So how do you go about that? What kind of workflows involving these AI tools can you use? Well, knowing about the four main chatbot platforms that we've all heard about, and these all have enterprise versions that have added security and data privacy and can work with your enterprise data, which is a very powerful thing. But just as a least common denominator, let's just talk about these platforms as we all know and love them, as we've encountered them, like ChatGPT and so on. Starting with Google Bard, it's especially good for learning about new things. This is an example. I don't expect you to read this tiny font, but what I wanted to show you here is that with the simple question of what is AI-assisted marketing, we got all of this in response. So unlike a search, sorry, I just dropped something there. Unlike a search where we would have gotten a bunch of links, what we got was an opening paragraph that told us what AI-assisted marketing was, and then 3 bullets telling us how it can help businesses, and then 5 bullets giving us examples of different kinds of AI-assisted marketing, and then a closing giving us some ideas on next steps to learn more. So that becomes really great raw content, similar to the raw content that James and Howard gave us in that Word document that we loaded into Claude 2, similar to what you see on this slide. I could just as easily have copied and pasted that output from Google Bard and put that into the same input field here to create a blog post about AI-assisted marketing, for example. But what's so great about Claude 2 then is that not only can you put in these Word documents and PDFs in addition to copying and pasting directly from online, but it really is good at the conversational aspect of working with users. All of them do that to some degree, but Anthropic, the company that made Claude 2, had that as a primary objective. And so it really excels at that collaborative back and forth capability. So for professional use, if you're an expert in your field, you can really get a lot of leverage from that. Now, Bing Chat has a whole other value proposition. Because it is directly connected to the web and was designed by Microsoft to really be search on steroids, although they might not like that characterization. What it's really good for is finding sources and citations for facts and statements that you've written or that others have written that you want to fact check. And so what you see here in its interface in the upper right in that dark green is a couple of paragraphs I just wrote speculating about climate change and ways we could extract CO2 from the atmosphere or throw iron filings in the ocean to gobble up a lot of CO2. And I was curious if that was really true or not. So I loaded it into Bing Chat with that prompt that says insert citations in this text. You see in the orange at the top there. And sure enough, it gave me a bunch of citations. You can see in the first and second paragraph, those little numbers there are footnotes that correspond to the learn more links that you see at the end. And I was able to then check all those facts, see that they indeed were true, and learn more about them in the process. So that's really powerful and for professional writers who want to put links into their articles to cite their sources. Now, what if you want to write prompts yourself? What you prompt is what you get. You know, garbage in is garbage out, not only for data, but also the prompt, which sets up the process to work with that data. So there's 4 tips that we can give you to write better prompts. One of those tips is to clearly define your purpose before you even start thinking about writing the prompt. If you're in marketing, is it lead generation or awareness building, you know, that sort of thing. Once you figure that out and you start writing your prompt, stay away from jargon and stay away from complex language because, as James was saying, the sort of idiot savant nature of these chatbots means that they can be confused by too much complexity. Perhaps the most powerful tip is to provide context, and there are multiple types of context. Factual context, like the number of client endpoints that Intel IT manages, can be useful if you're writing an article about that. Or, you know, you saw us load that whole Word document of factual context that James and Howard wrote. But style and tone context are also very important. When we told Claude 2 to write that article in the style of Andy Grove's High Output Management or Only the Paranoid Survive, that's an example of style or tone context. Now, I'm going to demonstrate another prompt for you that uses a different kind of context that we're showing here on the screen now, which is a detailed example of what we mean by something that we want the prompt to work with the chatbot to evaluate. So in a proofreader, you want to look at things like spelling, punctuation, grammar, syntax, and style. So let's take grammar here. We told the chatbot through our prompt what a grammar violation looks like, why it's a violation, and what the corrected form would look like, and why it's the correct form. So that's a very detailed way of giving context that can have huge payoff in a prompt. And then the final 4th tip is to test and refine. The proofreader prompt that we're going to show you, which is just as big and involved as that all-purpose writer prompt that we demonstrated a moment ago, is somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 500-600 words. And so there's a lot to go wrong. So it takes a lot of testing and refinement to make it work properly. So here is that that proofreader prompt. What we started with was some original text. We threw it in with the prompt. The prompt analyzed it and gave us a paragraph by paragraph analysis of all the violations in spelling, punctuation, syntax, grammar, and so forth. And we can zoom in and look at the syntax violation on paragraph 3. We had a fragmented run-on sentence, and it's telling us how it should be written in multiple sentences. And then it goes on to rewrite the entire original draft with correct spelling, punctuation, grammar, syntax, and style. And what's so cool about this is all of us have great ideas that we can just barf out on paper if we want to. But a lot of us are insecure about the correctness of our spelling, punctuation, grammar, syntax, and style. With a prompt like this, you can leverage your great ideas and no longer feel insecure about the correctness of how you write. So we think that's a really powerful prompt. But you know, it's not just about text. Images are very important. I write a lot of blog posts, and I always used to worry about finding the right image to go along with what I wrote. And are there copyright issues that I have to work around? And oh, this is going to take a long time. Well, now with these prompt-driven image creators like Bing Image Creator, you can quickly and easily make high-quality images that are tailored to your needs. And if you look at the left-hand channel, you see those 4 variations of the Simpsons eating at a restaurant. That was created by my son Josh, my 40-year-old son, the first time he ever encountered Bing Image Creator. And he wrote this 2-paragraph prompt. You can see a piece of it at the upper part of that. Uh, and that's what he got. And with no training and no knowledge about this, so that's pretty amazing. Now, if you're a professional artist and you'd like some knobs and dials to really do some professional art, then you can go to Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, a couple of competing generative text uh, that you have to pay for. These are solutions you have to pay for. Or you could go to Playground AI, which puts an interface on top of those and lets you do up to 1,000 images a day for free. And I use that quite a bit. So there's more to marketing, of course, than content generation. You know, the reason we're generating all this content usually is to build awareness or to generate leads. And where marketing and sales overlap is with the lead generation and lead management and lead nurturing. And there's great AI tools out there. There's also prompts we've written, but there's ready-made AI tools that you can get from other companies that will help you optimize your media buying for advertising, which is critical for lead generation because you got to spend money to make money. There's other specialized AI tools for event management and other AI tools that help you do lead scoring. So, for example, if you're lead scoring and you find the most qualified leads and you want to set up buyer meets seller opportunities at in-person events, you can use AI tools to help you optimize that entire process. And then there are AI tools that can help you analyze the sales data to see what worked and what didn't for your continuous improvement. But all along the way, we're talking about collaborative intelligence, and certainly in sales, the human relationships are the key. So we certainly don't want to imply that AI takes over from the human user here. And that gets to a key point about culture. You know, Andy Grove is famous for saying there are two kinds of companies, the quick and the dead. Clearly, that applies to AI because AI is so powerful. I believe this is a much bigger change than the PC revolution or the web revolution or the cloud or big data because we're now talking about another intelligence. We're not just connecting ourselves to each other in various ways. So this is powerful. And so we either embrace it or we get run over by it. But as we embrace it, we've got to do so responsibly. And leaders of teams need to make sure that the frontline folks who are working with customers become the AI whisperers and don't feel threatened by the change. You know, just as secretaries were displaced by word processing and email, and so many of them became office managers and beyond that, executives over the years, a similar up-leveling opportunity is going to happen here because AI handles a lot of the grunt work and asks of all of us to be more strategic, more empathetic, and more human. But there's a lot of leadership needed to prepare the organization for that mindset. In addition, ethical governance is critical because where there's great power, there's great responsibility. And so there's three key areas that we advocate in ethical AI governance. The first is oversight. That has to do with assessing the impact that AI is going to have throughout your organization and with your customers and with your supply chain. It has to do with testing the algorithms that you're using, especially in-house if you're working with the enterprise versions of these platforms in your own data to make sure that the way that they've been trained has not brought about bias or inaccuracies. Cybersecurity is critically important because so much more information is being shared in these collaborative conversational sessions. And that's also why user control is so critical, that users must always be able to opt in and opt out, that the machine is never our overlord. And that's kind of an AI principle. But perhaps the most important AI principle is limit your data collection to only the data you need when you need it, and then validate the outputs in terms of accuracy and bias in particular. Transparency applies both to content and process. The content you made, you see that little lowercase b toward the bottom of the slide? That shows that the image behind the text was made by Bing Image Creator. That's a watermark. That's an example of transparency in the content. There also needs to be transparency in the process, the fact that we used AI to produce this, or we're having an AI conversation. And monitoring for bias and inaccuracy, we keep talking about that because those are the two problems that keep coming up and that you can get sued for. Now, cultivating an ethical culture, Intel and many other companies have always been proud of their ethical cultures. But with AI, it's a time to reassess and reevaluate because AI magnifies the ethical aspects of everything we do. Well, there's a lot more to say, but I want to pause here and just do a quick recap of everything we've talked about so far. So AI amplifies our human skills. We've talked about marketing as a metaphor. There's a lot more we could have talked about with market research, content. We talked about content creation and branding. We could have gone on and on about sales and customer service and many other areas. But the key point is that it's collaborative intelligence, it's human insight and human oversight that's really driving the AI productivity. And together with these AI tools, we can really do something that we could never do before. So we're talking about efficiency, effectiveness, and quality, and really a step change in improvement in those elements that make up our productivity. So with that, James, I bet you've been looking to see if there's lots of questions.
Well,
Let's do that.
I have to admit, we've been doing these events, folks, for a long time, and rarely have I seen. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen as few questions. And I don't think this is a reflection at all on the speaker or the team that put this together. I think this has to do with this is brand new stuff, right? And I kind of go back to Dan. I've been working with the Fusion Syndicate because I've been involved before retirement and raising money and that kind of thing and bootstrapping startups. I was on a call with Dan and team with a specialist in business process reengineering in the greater Pacific Northwest. And the comment that they made after kind of Dan and team giving them a brief overview of what they were up to and what various prompts they had been writing. One of the things they said is that the TFS team, the Fusion Syndicate, is ahead of about 99% of the people that they've seen out there. And for those marketers out there, particularly the folks that are making their money, doing consulting around this area, I can tell you that I can see dozens of business opportunities for people doing it. And I think the big takeaway I got from that conversation with this business process reengineering consulting firm is that the people who really understand at fine detail how a particular workflow goes, how a particular business process works, whether you're creating a press release, so it's a content generation thing, whether you're in charge of building a survey to get some questions answered some from some potential customers, to building personas around the kinds of people you want to market to. Using these tools are incredibly powerful. And Dan, I did see two questions pop up, so let me handle one
Okay.
here first. It's from Max. And first thing, I think Max is our friend from Intel. He says, outstanding. So Dan, you did a good job.
Well, thank you,
Feel good
Max.
about that. But what can the TFS team share their thoughts around kind of Microsoft's view that Microsoft 365 Copilot is going to be the panacea for all things related to utilizing chatbots inside the enterprise?
So I'm going to start that and then I'm going to hand it off to Michael because this is very relevant to a conversation he and I were having about another piece of software. And that is there are multiple entry points for end users like us, all of us, to gain value from generative AI technology. November of last year, less than a year ago, ChatGPT came out and there was all this hype, right? And since then, a few of its competitors, like the four we showed you, Google Bard, Claude 2, and all that, Bing Chat came out. And so a lot of people got used to this idea that, oh, it's like Google. There's this little input field and you enter in your question or your prompt and you get something back. And so that's a use case that a lot of people know and maybe love or maybe not. To your point, though, Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace as well, And by the way, Salesforce has a whole app store of stuff that plugs into it. So major platforms, but Microsoft, I think, being the most important because of Windows and Office and all the Azure, enterprise stuff in Azure, they are integrating generative AI in everything. And what does that mean? Does that mean that there's no longer an opportunity to write these cool prompts and to do all this cool stuff? No, no, it doesn't mean that at all. Um, and I'm going to hand it off to Michael to talk about Grammarly, which some of you at Intel may know is going to be used by parts of Intel to use generative AI in a much more controlled way. But it's a lot like Microsoft 365 using Word and things in a controlled way. So Michael, talk about how the Grammarly example works.
So yeah, oh, thank you. Excellent question. So Grammarly, I don't know, like I've been a paying customer since like 2018, like right after it came out, and they just rolled out with Grammarly Go, which is a OpenAI powered chatbot. So I don't know if anyone's used it. Dan and I were playing with it yesterday and today, and the cool thing is that you can use complex
Conversational.
prompts in Grammarly Go. So it works and it's great. And I highly recommend that you play with it if you have access to it. My understanding, like Dan said, is like, they're rolling it out at Intel. Don't know anything about it. I hope I didn't, come off too early to say that. But long story short, it works. And it's an example of how these apps are getting infused into your workflows. And so I think that's the most important step here is, yes, I think Copilot will be getting into every part of our lives and our workflow. But right now, if you have Grammarly, go check it out, on Word, on Outlook, or whatnot, because you can use it and it's built into the workflow. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the coming months.
And it's up to Intel to have a policy on whether or not it wants to offer all of that, all of the above to users or not. It costs money, right? With Microsoft 365, it's $30 per seat. Now I'm sure there's an enterprise deal that's a lot cheaper than that. But for the Fusion Syndicate, if we wanted to use it, we'd pay $30 per seat for each user. And if we could use it then with Microsoft Word in a way that's very similar to what Grammarly does, and also enables us to put our complex prompts in there too if we want to. So it gives us the option of both. And so that's a common thing that you see with these major platforms is they want to give you both. They want to give you their way of doing it that makes it real easy for you, the user, where you don't have to learn about all the stuff we've had to learn about. But if you're someone who does like to go deeper, they give you a chance to do that too. However, with Grammarly, there's a limitation that you can only use a complex prompt within a session. Once your session is over, it forgets everything that you did with that prompt. And that's not the case with ChatGPT or Claude 2 or these platforms when you use them directly. So that's an advantage that we find when we use Claude 2 is my favorite, but when we use those platforms directly.
Yeah, so Dan, let me, because I think that's a kind of a level of detail that maybe the audience is going to struggle with right now. But
Sorry.
I'm not certainly not trying to insult our highly intelligent audience, whom I deeply respect. But kind of, because I'm just a sales guy, and you need to kind of make it simple for me to understand. But how I kind of understand it is that you've got, just like remember when Netscape introduced a free public browser and everyone, who had a home PC was using it? Well, imagine that as your free version of Claude 2 or ChatGPT 3.0, the version that you don't spend any money on. And they use publicly available large language models, which is basically the big data set that they put into a cloud computing environment and ran their algorithms on it, right? Because those are the three ingredients that you need for any AI system. You need big cloud computing, you need lots and lots and lots of data for your large language models, and you need to write algorithms that interrogate it. Now that's the public version. The private version, the enterprise version, is just what Netscape did. If you wanted a browser that limited people's ability to go to the World Wide Web inside your enterprise, right? And you use that browser to point to people to internal data. That's the way of thinking about these enterprise versions. And I was at a venture event a couple of weeks ago with the president of Salesforce.com, basically said that. He says, look, where we see this real valuable, it's not really a platform technology. It's somewhere between a platform technology and an ingredient technology. And that they were going to bake generative AI into every stage of the Salesforce.com pipeline. So that when I'm moving a lead from a prospect, a suspect to a prospect to a qualified lead, I'm able to use my internal AI, generative AI tools to do some things that make me smarter about how to move that opportunity from one stage to the next, what content I should feed the opportunity, etc. So that's the difference. So we got publicly available stuff, which is what Dan and team used to generate the content that you generated for us, right, Dan? That's what you guys did.
Yeah, yeah. We just used Claude 2 mostly to do what was
Yeah,
shown
so
today.
just imagine you got an enterprise version, you got a public version, and that's how how this is going to be. By the way, I've got good news for the Fusion Syndicate. Some people want to talk to you guys after this. This is good. This is
Well,
good.
we're always happy to
Hey,
talk to people.
okay, so let me kind of I'm looking at some questions here. Here's a good question. For Grant, I'm at a nonprofit and I'm working on, I want to reply to request for quotation and I want to write a grant. How would I apply this generative AI to that kind of environment?
Well, what occurs to me, because I've been, doing all this prompt engineering, writing all these prompts, is I would write a prompt for that to use with either ChatGPT or Claude 2. And the way I would write the prompt is I would look at a successful grant and I would get the help of Claude 2 to analyze it as a PDF to say, what are the key elements of this that made it successful? Um, and I might feed in other knowledge that I had, background information that might be in Word documents or something like that. And then I would create a prompt to have a dialogue with the end user to ask questions to fill out the different fields, in the form basically, and then generate the output of the grant proposal from there. Very similar to what you saw in our demo of how we took your essay and turned it into a marketing article, that dialogue where the Claude 2 asked the question about what's your topic, what's your audience, what's your word length. It'd be different questions, about grant stuff. And ideally, you would want to have an expert in grant writing, and maybe that's you, help with writing the prompt, because to get the right answer, you have to ask the right questions. And since I'm not an expert in grantsmanship, I don't know what the questions are to put in the prompt, but maybe you do. So maybe I would work with you to do that. Michael?
Okay, so Dan, that was a very long answer. My very short answer will be go to your tool of choice like ChatGPT and ask, what are some tips? How can I use ChatGPT to help write a grant? And start there.
That's a better answer.
All right. Well, let me ask a couple of real simple questions, and I want to ask a deeper dive question about how to really leverage generative AI into business workflow. First off, do you have to pay for Claude to upload a document? Because it seems, at least according to this anonymous question asker, is that the Google and ChatGPT don't allow you to upload docs, and I didn't think that was true. Can you give a little more color about the different, you talked a bit about how to use different bots to do different things. Give us a little more color on that.
Sure, James. There are free versions and there are paid versions of all of these, as you correctly pointed out. And what distinguishes the free version of Claude 2 from the free versions of ChatGPT and Bard and Bing Chat is that you can attach up to 5 PDFs and or Word documents specifically of up to 10 megabytes each. So 5 times 10, 50 megabytes worth of stuff, and then it will work with that. Now the limitation of the free version of Claude 2 is it will only give you so many interactions, in a session, and then it'll say, okay, I'm not going to work with you for another 6 hours. Come back at midnight or something.
Well, that we in fact ran into that when we were preparing for trying to do a live demo. We were using the free version of Claude, and then we basically, I guess you said the term is we ran out of tokens.
Yeah.
Basically, we ran out of cycles that we were allowed to have in the cloud environment. Is
That's why
basically
we
what
chose
happened.
not to do a live demo. We could have
Exactly.
done a live demo, except didn't want to be embarrassed by having that happen.
Yeah, because something Mr. Murphy's going to show up. We know he will.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good answer. Now, kind of the more deep, the deep question that I think you have that we have here is how do you train? You know, and this is both technology and human being, you know, change management. How do we integrate generative AI into daily workflow? I mean, is it something that an enterprise is just going to kind of figure out on their own, or are they going to go to somebody like Salesforce and go and Microsoft and say, okay, guys, you know, where is AI being implemented? I want to implement it, but I only want to limit it to data inside my enterprise and limited external.
Well, so I'll set this up for Greg to answer because this really has to do with the whole human plus AI combination and the right kind of mindset that we as human users should be adopting and the kinds of expectations we should have. But I guess the first thing is, although you can just jump in and start playing with this stuff, that's what we did, and it worked out okay for us. If you want to be efficient about it, you're a business that's trying to maximize your revenues, minimize your costs, then it does help to have a little expert guidance at first. That's one of the things we do, but there's lots of different places you can get that. But Greg, share your thoughts about that whole human AI combination and what it takes to kind of get comfortable with it.
Thanks, Dan. I'm not sure, James, I can answer that question on its own, but I'm called the AI contrarian because I do feel that, like many people said, AI is the current fairy dust. We're trying to spread it over everything and it's going to solve everything for us. We all know that humans still have a strong role to play, and AI hallucinates and does strange things along the way. So human intervention, human control is still very important. I believe that every company will find its own way, and everyone, as Dan said, may try to have the app or the AI model do it for them, but they will find some way to adapt it for themselves. No one has yet figured out, I believe, a cookie cutter answer to how to integrate it. Every company is different. Every marketing company is different. I've worked with P&G and Bacardi and Microsoft. They're all different, and they will have to find their own way using the model, but always have human intervention, which you alluded to earlier, James. You said that was important, and you're right.
And you know, this is another point of differentiation in that earlier question about Microsoft 365 versus using the chatbot interface directly. If you're using something like Microsoft 365 or Grammarly, they will have done a lot for you in sort of curating the experience within their user experience engineering work, right? You still have to have a sense of patience and flexibility because of that, the fact that you're dealing with artificial intelligence, not just a machine. And so there are sometimes unpredictable things that happen even within those tightly controlled environments. But Greg, I think your point is especially apt for what we've been experiencing as we work directly with things like Claude 2 and ChatGPT, because it's not like legacy computing. It's not like programming a computer, you know. It's like working with a person.
Yeah.
James,
Well, let me go ahead.
If I might, James,
Go ahead, Greg, and then we'll move on to some other questions here. Go ahead.
someone put a question up about using research, market research, and AI, which I saw come up, and it's a good question. Here's what happens, as you know. The conundrum we have right now is that we use qualitative to get insights, competitive advantage, and different ideas that are out of the box. Often we're not sure how they scale. Are they just one person, one group, one weird part of the cohort? How applicable are these? And so the obvious one we used to use was take those findings into a broad quantitative research program, which one, costs money, two, costs time, and three, you're trying to take ideas and put them into quant, which they don't work together. Now, it seems as though AI is being trained more and more to take those concepts which emerge from the qual portion with human intervention and say, what do we know? And what do we know about these consumers and how apt are these? So it has the potential to speed up that entire quant phase by 10x, if you like, at very low or zero cost. So we're all very excited to hear about that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. It can really speed up market research and the quantitative phase in particular, because it can reach out and look at all the web interactions that people are having on social media with you and your competitors and give you instant analysis and insights on that, among other things.
Yeah, I can tell you that I was on big channel strategy projects for Microsoft and Sun Micro and NetApp, where we had to produce, and it took forever, generating surveys, generating the personas that we wanted to interview for. We had to write that all by hand. And for those of you who understand that process of how you create surveys, how you create personas, and then push that questionnaire out, and you want to use a AI chat bot to help you with your process, literally write down in detail the process that you use to get the result if you had actually done it yourself. And that is what you feed in to a generative AI bot. That ends up being what is, there's actually a new role that it came out of Anthropic. It's called prompt engineering. It is, Dan and I have been throwing around this term called natural language programming.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's what it is. I'm an expert in writing surveys. If I can write down in detail the process that I am using and the touch points, the different milestones I have to achieve to get to a good quality survey, if I can document that process, AI becomes that idiot savant that generates the content and the questions that you want. And it's truly remarkable, because that's exactly what Dan and team did for the academic paper that Howard and I wrote.
Yeah, NLG is the TLA for what you're talking about, natural language generative programming. And prompt engineering is that. We happen to speak English here in America, so we use English as the natural language that we write our prompts in. But it is very much like programming, because you're thinking about the logic and delineating tasks and setting up quality assurance practices within the program and so forth.
Okay.
So, were there any
Good.
other
Oh
good
God,
questions?
we got where do you want to start? I mean, we should, I think, address a little bit of the the elephant in the room, so to speak.
Okay.
And that's the concerns about generative AI. And are we just having is this the early stages of what we experience with social media and the corrosive effects that it can bring to society? And I think, Dan, you addressed this, but
Oh, yeah.
it really is something that we need to be concerned about. And I think it points both from a public policy perspective, but also the kind of the rules of the road as they're being used inside corporations, of which I think Intel's doing a very mindful job of thinking about how to best utilize this technology, because they know they can't stop it, right? There isn't a tool that humanity has invented. I would challenge everyone on this call to name me one tool where humans haven't used it. This is no different. We are a tool creating species. This is going to be used as well. Dan, take us through again. How do we use the stuff ethically?
Well, it's got to be a top-down process. Organizational leaders, as well as government leaders and leaders in all walks of life, really need to drive ethical governance. And, we talked on our slides about the specifics around that. But because there is such a quantum leap of empowerment with AI, the dangers are great. AI safety is a real issue. Disinformation is just the tip of the iceberg there. What social media did with respect to disinformation and how that affected various political systems around the world is nothing compared to what deep fakes can do. Now, Intel is doing some really great work around deep fake detection. Michael, you might want to talk to that, because you actually worked on that, I think.
Well, okay, so yeah, I think the organizations have to take charge, right? To Dan's point, governments need to start coming down with regulation, and we're seeing that in the EU, America, China, all over the place, even states, individual states. So that's good. All that's trickling down. Hopefully it goes fast enough. And then, there's a trust but verify aspect of things, right? It's a lot of people out there. It's like, well, Adobe can do watermarks. Okay, cool. But what if you crop those out, right? So there has to be a verify situation. And out of Intel Labs, they're working on with SUNY is fake catcher, right? It literally allow on Intel platforms with AI acceleration, you can detect, or they're claiming, and I know it works, that they could detect deepfakes in real time, and that is very powerful, right? If you could detect that this is not true, it's not verified right away when it's on your screen, you win because it's fake. And so there definitely needs to be regulation, which we're seeing. We need businesses, the leaders, to take up and make sure that they're doing it legitimately and doing the right things with all their employees. And then on top of that, we need that trust but verify systems. And I know Intel's working on it out of Intel Labs. It's phenomenal work. I think we look at it. It's good stuff, and we need to pump more resources into that program and get that out as fast as possible.
And it's not just Intel doing these things. I mean, I think Intel has a really good lead both in AI acceleration and also confidential computing is another built-in capability in the Xeon processors that's going to be really valuable as we use AI in our supply chain management, and we're sharing roadmap information with OEMs and things like that. You never want that encrypted information to be decrypted, and confidential computing allows applications to operate on encrypted data while it's remaining encrypted. So AI is going to make that far more important. So Intel was very smart strategically in working on both confidential computing and AI acceleration at the same time, years ago. That's now evident in the 4th generation Xeon processors.
Yeah, let's kind of move on to a little bit more specific things, but to just kind of sum this up, because the audience member has asked several times about the kind of the ethical and political implications of AI. Trust that one of the reasons next year that we want to have this conversation about the past, the present, and the future of information technology and Intel's role in it is to talk about technology trends going into the future. We know where we've been, we know where we are now, where are things headed? And for those of you who track trends around convergent technologies, that's actually a thing. It's a term. You can interrogate it on Claude or your favorite chatbot and find out that we have a gaggle of technologies that are all coming together at the same time. And the next, we're talking about the next several years that could have really profound impacts on society and humanity as a whole. And the Intel Alumni Network wants to have a conversation about this for the benefit of our members as well as for the benefit of Intel employees. That's why this document that Dan helped us on, that Howard and I originally drafted, we considered so important because we realize that this organization needs to have these very difficult but very important conversations. So with that said, go ahead, Dan, and then let me move on.
I was just going to say, I've been working with industry standards my entire career since 1981 when the IBM PC came out. And my observation is that both top down and bottom up are important. That, there's the ISO and ANSI and government regulations and all that, which is critically important, especially for things like government procurement and all that. But there's de facto standards. The way graphical user interfaces emerged and the reason we're all using Windows and stuff, that had nothing to do with top-down standards. That was the market voting with its dollars and the successful marketing and sales of a company like Microsoft and so on. So my point is that we as business professionals and marketing professionals have a responsibility to adopt and use these tools in a way that is ethical. And that's the de facto standards. That will set the habits, the pace, the way people use things. And then as the top-down regulations crystallize, which are really important, that'll ensure that the platforms adhere to certain rules of the road. But it's the combination of those things. So we have something that we have to do. We have to behave responsibly.
I agree. And I can certainly tell you that, when we grew up, I'm over 60 now, and I remember thinking that every technical innovation that occurred that was created in this valley was somehow really, really great. And I think we're all beginning to recognize that there are both intended and unintended consequences to technical innovation. And we're at a point now, given the speed of which technological change seems to be taking place, that we need to take a pause and at least we need to have a conversation about this. And I am a right of center person. I think you actually need reasonable regulation. So that said, we have some very practical questions, Dan and team, that want to be that the audience is asking here. So, how do I'm running a website. How do I integrate AI into my website? I think you were helping Mr. Shantanu Gupta, a fellow board member and the CEO of Cascade Systems Technology. You gave him some tips or tricks of how to integrate that to his internal website.
Yeah, we have an ebook that we haven't actually published yet, but it's in final manuscript form, which has, I think it's a 9-step tutorial on exactly how to do that. But just in short, what you can do is sign up for an account with any of the major chatbot platforms. Anthropic with Claude 2 is the one I think I recommended to Shantanu. And it costs some money then to be able to use their application programming interface, their API, and you pay based on how much you use it, how many times it gets hit by your website. And you build their API into the website, and I won't go into all the details, but there's a little agent and a little thing you put on each web page. And basically, it's able to then comprehend everything that's on your website, all the products that you mention and stuff like that. And then when a visitor visits your website and goes to the internal search thing for your website, what they're getting is a AI empowered search capability. It's not like working with ChatGPT or Claude 2. It's like working with search, but the results they get are far more tailored and specific and accurate. And each time it gets used, it gets better and better and better. So that's the easy step. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and think about this, guys. For those of you, the comment that the president of Salesforce.com made at the event I was at is managing being able to integrate your website along with your entire instance of Salesforce throughout your entire pipeline management process, from marketing, getting leads in the front end, to sales taking over at a certain pace at a certain point and driving it to successfully close business. That's how powerful this stuff can be. I mean, quite literally, the more Dan and team educates me on this, the more I realize that this is just a free open field to go play, experiment, and figure out how to streamline and accelerate business processes. Because that's what it boils down to. This is this meta. Yeah, we're at the metadata level. We're not even at the application layer anymore. We're at a level of abstraction above that around business process and workflow. So moving from that, for those of you out there that are just kind of new to this, just keep plugging away at it. It's not difficult. Yeah, it's complicated, but you'll figure it out. And most important, play with it.
Well,
Play
and
with it.
Can I just
go
close
ahead,
the loop
Dan.
on that thing about the website? Because what I wanted to say is that simple thing of just supercharging that internal search, but it looks the same to the visitor of your website as it did before. It just gives better results. That's the easy step that you can do to kind of test the waters. And once you see the good results and the more sales that you get, the next step is to build an actual chat bot into your website. So the user is interacting with something that looks a lot like Claude 2 or ChatGPT, because then the user can ask more detailed questions, get more detailed answers about your company and how you can help them. And then the next step after that is whenever customers have billing inquiries, have it get handled by a chat bot or things like that. Now, the way to do that, though, is to train the chatbots with your data and have your frontline customer service reps be the people responsible for not only training but managing the process, and pay them more because now they have greater responsibilities. And so what you're going to get is more sales and grow as a business, and your employees are going to grow in their value add at the same time.
Michael, do you have a comment there? You got that Cheshire cat smile.
No, I'm happy. That was good, Dan. That was excellent.
Okay, yeah, Dan, that was a good answer. So, real simple question: where's a good place to go get smart on this? Are there training classes you'd recommend? Should they call the Fusion Syndicate? So they just bang away at Claude 2 for a while until they get frustrated and find a course online? what's your recommendation for how do you get smart on this stuff fast?
I think, Michael, you have an official answer for us about uh, sending us an email, following up
Yeah, well,
afterward.
look, I already did the promo.
Okay, so let me
And,
say that we
give
already,
some specific recommendations besides contacting you.
yeah, we are, well, in addition to contacting us, which we invite you to do because we're very interested in talking with folks after the session, and you can find us on LinkedIn, hashtag the Fusion Syndicate. There's lots of places to go to get information. One of the places I like to go is OpenAI. That's the ChatGPT people. They have a lot of really great articles and success stories and blogs on their site. In addition, Anthropic, which is the Claude 2 people, have a lot of great information, as does Microsoft and Google. They each are very, very involved in this. Beyond that, I've used YouTube a lot to learn tips and tricks about prompt engineering, which I've used to really dramatically improve the way I write prompts. And all of us have done that in the Fusion Syndicate, not just me. And there's one YouTube influencer that I particularly like. Matt Wolfe is his name, Wolfe. You can go look for him. Future Tools is the name of his company. We have no affiliation with them. I'm making no money by mentioning him, but I thought he was really good at explaining what I wanted to learn about.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I can tell you again, it's like with the recommendation I have, is just start hunting and pecking. Now I know that there are a number, like MIT, I believe Max Torres, who's on a current Intel employee, part of technology development, is taking that class. There are courses at Stanford. There's a lot of people. Everyone's running at this as fast as they can because nobody is quite sure how this is going to pan out. If we think about this in terms of a classic Gartner Group hype cycle, we're running up the first. We're not to the point of disillusionment yet, right? We're still in the hype. We're in the hype phase of the hype cycle. So
Yeah, there
kind of
was a head fake there when people were calling for that pause. You remember that? When
yeah,
people got really scared about the AI safety, and legitimately so.
yeah.
I don't mean to discount that, but I think we've somehow got past that. And you're right, the hype is still building.
100%.
Agreed. Okay. So one interesting question here is about integration of AI into hardware, specifically, Dan, around medical devices. Intel apparently, had a product that played around with this at one point in time. They tried to apply a fuzzy logic kind of solution. I guess that's early stage AI. How do you see, AI as we see it now is really, our relationship is through a browser. Does this get integrated into hardware of all kinds? And what does that kind of
Yeah.
sort of look like from what you've been able to garner?
Well, there's training and there's inference. And so let's talk about that for a second, because that's key to answering your question. So training these large language models, like the way ChatGPT was trained on everything on the World Wide Web until November 2021, I think, and it sometimes gives you an answer saying, oh, I can't answer that because I only know up to that date. So that's all happening in the cloud on, tens of thousands of servers or more in data centers. And that's, James, you alluded to that when you introduced us, how that processing power is really key to AI. So that's really important, but there's also what's happening on your local device, whether it's a smartphone or a PC or a medical device, as you mentioned in the question, and that's inference. And so that is applying what the user is trying to accomplish with that cloud resource. So James, you and I first worked together when client server computing emerged in the early 90s, and we helped Intel lead that dramatic change. It's kind of like that. You can think of the inference as being like the client and the training as being like the server. And so those two have to work together. So that's why Intel has not only built into its Xeon processors some amazing AI acceleration capability that offloads those NVIDIA chips that cost so much in those data centers and makes it a much more cost optimized way to go. But it's also building into the core processors a lot of that AI inference capability. In fact, now in the new 14th gen, that's one of the big advertising messages I'm hearing is that you're now AI ready and you're going to be able to do some amazing things because it's built in. And frankly, Apple is doing that too with their M1, M2, M3 processors, and all the ARM process. Everybody's doing that, right? So the
Okay,
medical
so
devices are doing it too.
yeah,
Mhm.
so in other words, the gold rush is on both for hardware and software. So if I'm a company, I have a limited budget, what sort of tools should I think, AI tools, should I think about subscribing to and paying for now?
Well, it depends a lot on your situation. What are your business requirements? What are your business processes? And what does your IT environment look like today? For example, I was speaking with a mid-size supplier to the automotive industry, whose CEO is an Intel alum, who was talking to us because of you, James. He once worked for you, I think. And anyway, his company uses Microsoft software, both on the client and the Azure cloud side. And so it occurred to me that Microsoft 365 with AI Copilot, and on the back end, Microsoft Dynamics CRM with Copilot is a natural, because it's just an incremental change. They're already using the software, and now they have new capabilities to add to it. But for someone else who's maybe using Salesforce as their CRM, then they should probably buy into the Einstein capability that is the generative AI uh, built into the Salesforce platform, and then the Salesforce App Exchange, which has all these third-party plugins that can take advantage of those capabilities to extend into marketing automation and other elements beyond the base Salesforce capability.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael. And I got to ask a question about education. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Dan, again, long answer, very good. If you have zero budget, the best three tools to go after, Claude 2, you can upload. It's just like ChatGPT, but better in many ways, especially uploading documents, because that's free. And then you got Bing Chat as well as Google Bard. All you can use those three right now for free. You can even create images with Bing Chat, so it's super easy. The best thing right now is if you don't know what to do, Claude 2, Bing, and Bard, right? Just start
Okay,
playing.
so Michael, if you were to subscribe to one right now, and I'm a content creator, which one would you subscribe to?
Claude 2.
Claude 2.
Okay.
And I just put that in the link.
That's
there.
an easy answer.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, you don't get the direct connection to the web, but Bing Chat is free. And
Yeah.
so the combination of Claude 2 and Bing Chat is all I need
Yeah, and
right now.
Yeah.
Through the presentation, right? They have different purposes.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
But if you're
Well,
an
good.
organization, if you're Intel, if you're a manager of a division at Intel, you have a different set of challenges before you than if you're me or Michael. And so you probably want to look at an enterprise version that has certain security and data privacy capabilities, and you want to negotiate a deal that has to do with training it on your data, because you have certain business requirements and business processes in mind that you want to supercharge, right? So that's a whole different discussion.
Yep.
Well, but before, because we're getting down, we got 62 people left online. I got to ask this question from Alan about the impact of generative AI on education, most specifically, Alan Wong, who is deeply involved with education, continuing education at San Jose State University. What kind of marketing advice would you give to kids that are thinking of becoming marketing professionals? How important is this? And I think I know the answer, and let's start with Michael first. Let's not let Dan start. Let's try let's switch this up. You go ahead, Michael.
Dan is much better at this than I am. So long story short, I think so I have a 6-year-old daughter. She's in first grade. And I think starting in elementary school, whenever they start playing with devices, soon AI is going to be on everything, right? So they're going to learn that what this device is, if it's an iPad. In a year, AI is going to be infused into this device. And so they're going to be grown up with it. So I think that if you're in college now, you need to jump on this right away. It's kind of like what the 4 of us did back in January and February. It's like, oh crap, we got to learn this. We got to embrace AI for marketing now. If you're in college, I'm sure they're going to start teaching that, right? And the kids know to use these tools because it allowed them to cheat for a little bit until professors and schools caught up. And so soon we're going to see more and more usage of, AI tools, and it's going to just make us more human, right? But like we said a couple times through the presentation there, there's always human insight and oversight that's required, and these tools allow us to be more human.
But I think there's two answers to your question. I love Michael's answer, and I agree 100% with it. It can really help kids learn, and learning about AI-assisted marketing, which I think the question alluded to as well, I think is very important. It's not just learning about AI-assisted marketing, but learning about AI-assisted anything, learning about how generative AI can help us with content, both in creating content and understanding content better. And that is something that can apply to engineering and to marketing and to anything, right? And I think that just as kids should be learning critical thinking skills in school, that's kind of a first principles thing that can help you learn about any field. Generative AI and the capabilities of using it's not on the same level as critical thinking skills, but it has that same kind of first principles aspect to it, that it's a tool that can empower you with anything that relates to content, and just about everything does.
That's a great answer. Greg, quick comment, then I got to ask the last two questions, and then we're going to have to call it a day.
Thanks, James. Quick comment. I'm the contrarian. I would first of all teach the kids that AI is not human. There's an old saying in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, the map is not the territory. The two different things. And AI is not humanity, and humanity comes first and must control AI, or else, as Arthur Clarke would say with HAL, we're all doomed anyway.
Yeah,
that's it.
Dave?
Yeah, no, that's very true. We created this stuff, so we ought to take the steps that's needed to control it. We're not passive actors. So the last two questions, guys. So, can you talk about the creation of what this questioner is asking, these customized narrow language models? And I think we alluded to this in, kind of the private enterprise version of generative AI. But these narrow language models or small language models that are run locally within the enterprise. Dan, why don't you give us a couple thoughts on this?
So this is a little different than what we had alluded to earlier. So when you had set up the conversation, you said one of the things you need is this massive amount of back-end compute in the cloud. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's not always true. There's these new things going on that actually do it in a much smaller thing, but I didn't want to bring that up. That's what this questioner is bringing up. And some of this is being done in open source, which is a little scary because it doesn't have the same guardrails and regulations that companies who are scared of being sued by the European Union have. And not only is it open source, but it can run in a single relatively powerful PC with a decent graphics card. And that means any individual actor who might have malicious intent could do really awful things with superpowers. That's the issue.
Right. Very good answer. Michael, Greg, anything to contribute there? Or we roll to maybe the last question here of the day, then we can sum it up. There's a product called Custom GPT to build apparently chatbots for a website that this person is looking to create, as well as a marketing tool. It's fairly easy to use and doesn't cost very much. Do you have any experience with this, and is it worthwhile?
I don't have any experience personally. Michael or Greg, do either of you have experience with that? I want to warn you, though, about a category of things like this that have value, but also have risk. And that is Chrome plugins that work with ChatGPT. Not to be confused with ChatGPT Plus, which has its own way of doing plugins, but that's something you pay money for. I'm talking about using the free version of ChatGPT with the free Chrome browser and these freely available plugins that you can get just like any other kind of Chrome plugins, the extensions, I think they call them, right? There's some that are specialized to work with ChatGPT to connect it to the web, which is a very powerful thing to do. But what happens is it gives information not only on everything you've done in your session to whoever wrote that plugin, but also it tracks you everything you did before the session and after the session because it's connected to your browser. Any browser plugin will do that. So be very judicious about what plugins you put in your browser. That's the danger with these things.
Yeah, that's a privacy issue, right? And so, and my angle on this is no, I haven't custom GPT, I think is what it is. There's so many new tools that are popping up, and there was a prediction months ago saying like, hey, there are so many AI tools that are that are being created right now, and 90% of them are going to fail. Just like we saw in the social era, all these tools popped up, and when the dust settled, we only had a few big giants do, like Hootsuite, for example, right? So anyway, what I'm getting at is, you can put in a lot of time and energy these early days on one tool, and then it can just go belly up. And that is a concern that I have. Like, I've expressed to other people. It's like, we just want to make sure that you pick a horse that's going to last the race. And I don't know.
And so, yeah, we work directly with the platforms because they're going to be around for a while.
Well, that, and it's just like, it makes sense. Like, there are all these tools are out there, and we just pick the right tool.
Well, maybe this is something that we should publish for the benefit of the membership at some point, is kind of tips and tricks for safely using AI. And I think that would be a worthwhile thing that we could send out as a separate communication.
Yeah. And I thought your question was about chaos GPT, which is something you should stay the hell away from. That is dangerous.
I've never heard of that before, but I will remember not to use it.
Yeah.
Hey, so Howard Jacob made a very good point here via text to me, is that you understand that narrow language models are really focused on a specific domain. It's not really whether they're small or large language models. So like legal Gen AI, right? I think that's what the question really is about. And I think the answer is certainly, I mean, you see generative AI business models floating across pre-seed and seed round VCs all the time these days. They're saying, well, we're going to be the expert generative AI expert for estheticians, right? Just to pick a category, for hairdressers, for grease monkeys that fix that change oil in cars. I mean, literally, you can think of the most absurd, very narrow vertical, and somebody's going to come up with a version of Gen AI that's going to try to tackle,
Okay, so I misunderstood at first. I now understand.
Well, I asked the question poorly. So go ahead.
There's a distinction there between the training of the large language model and the large language model itself, or narrow language model, or whatever the model happens to be. Now, there are these two different sizes of models that we talked about. That's one thing, but they do pretty much the same kind of stuff, right? They can be as broad scoped as the small ones can, as the large ones can. But this idea of having a legal expert or a medical expert or what have you, that's more usually in the training. Because these large language models can have like 100 billion variables or parameters each, which is weighted statistically differently. And then there's all this tuning. And then the data they're exposed to is how they're trained. And so if you expose it only to a whole lot of legal data, and all the legal decisions, judicial decisions made or whatever, then yeah, that's what it's going to be for. So there are consultancies that make a lot of money, doing that for corporate clients and the like, and we're going to see a whole lot of that. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that to sum it up, and then we're going to wrap it up here. I mean, when we think about this, for those of us who were around for the client server re-engineering and all of the big consultancies that created basically a category of consulting called business process re-engineering, which really at the end of the day means, how do we get people inside a corporation to adopt new technology and manage the change management issues around it, right?
Based on workflows.
Yeah, based on workflows. This is exactly what this is, except it's on steroids. And so for those of you who have got really deep domain expertise, there is a prompt engineering job probably in your future if you want it. And I don't think I'm exaggerating, Michael, Dan, and Greg.
I like to say this is the age of the MBA. If you're a mile wide and an inch deep, this is your era, because now you can be the puppet master and AI can be your puppets.
Exactly. Okay, with that, guys, look, we're gonna wrap this up. I want to thank our panelists today, Dan, Michael, and Greg. Thank you very much. Also, of course, to Mike Trainer, who keeps us on the straight and narrow with respect to logistics and making these things happen. Thanks to Howard Jacob, who is my mensch and keeps us on track in terms of good process and reminds me that occasionally I have to take a breath and shut up. I think that applies both to you and me, Dan, because you and I can get on a tear. But I want to thank everyone for attending and understand that I think this is the beginning of a series of conversations that we want to have, that the Intel Alumni Network wants to have around the present and the future of technology. AI, of course, but other things as well. So please stay tuned to that. Please, I believe, Michael, you shared the contact information, both an email address and LinkedIn page. So please reach out to the Fusion Syndicate if you're interested in learning more, or you might have a potential project for them. Remember, they're alums, they're friends, they speak your language, they can add a lot of value. And I want to thank everybody, and thanks, guys. Thanks to all of my Intel alumni friends out there. Bye-bye.